Welcome to the Personality Politics podcast, the podcast where we get to know the people behind the politicians. In every episode, we leave the policy debates and party politics at the door to explore the personal stories that shape the people who represent us. My guest today is Labour MP Graeme Downie, who discusses growing up on an RAF base, Hearts Football Club, and much more beyond politics. So let's get started. I'm Tom Lane, and this is Personality Politics. Hello and welcome to the latest edition of the Personality Politics podcast. I'm Tom Lane and I'm joined by the Labour MP, Graeme Downie. Graeme, thank you very much for joining me today.
Hi there, Tom. Good. Thanks for having me on.
I'd like to start with the most difficult question of all. And I always look through the social media of the guest I've got on just beforehand. And one thing that you posted about was obviously the Great British Summer Savings that are taking place. I wondered, as a youngster, what was your sort of place to go during the summer months?
Bit of a variety, to be honest. I was a bit of a geek, so my dad and I used to go to air shows quite a lot, but usually it was a swimming pool. So I grew up. I'm sure we'll come on to this, but I grew up in Berlin on RAF base, and to be honest, it was bike up to the swimming pool because it was the place you were allowed to go on your own. So I was 8, and you were allowed to go to the swimming pool, So that was usually my thing, or just kicking around a game of football or something.
Fantastic. Obviously, you talked about sort of growing up near base there. I wondered if you could talk to me a little bit about that. What was that like?
Yeah, so I moved to Berlin when I was 7. My dad was a electrician, was working with the RAF for a few years. So I moved there when I was 7. So I was there when the Berlin Wall came down in 1989. A fairly unique place to live. Heard Russian helicopters and Russian artillery practicing about a mile from my house. The way the crow flies. So many interesting things that happened. Rudolf Hess died when I was there. We obviously had lots of IRA bomb attacks that were actually down the corridor in West Germany as well. And yeah, I was there when the Berlin Wall came down. So it was fairly formative. I think it's fair to say. I was there when I was 7 till I came back 1990. So I was 9, about to turn 10 when we came back across. A very early introduction to politics and its realities, I think, is probably a fair way to put it.
What's that like growing up as a youngster? Obviously, me growing up as a youngster, I'm knocking on the neighbour's door, we're going bike riding. What's that like as a sort of a young child growing up in that way?
It's you get quite a lot of freedom. I mean, because you're on an RAF base, so you're pretty secure. You've got a bike and off you go. My parents were always quite good believers in, well, not quite look after yourself, but given quite a lot of freedom and independence to just kind of go around. So it was a really, I mean, it was a great childhood, to be honest. You went out with your friends. That's just what you got to do. It was really, the base was fairly small. You also had this slightly, let's say, terrifying knowledge, but you knew that because it was a small place you were living in. Yes, you had the freedom, but if anyone caught you doing anything, it would always get back to your parents because everyone knew everybody. So it was, oh yeah, it was that kid causing trouble. It was that kid causing trouble. So it was the nature of the base as well, and how it operated. Doors were open, you just crashed in and out of people's houses, and everything was fine. The only rule you had to be really careful of, and when you're campaigning, it's something we should always bring back, is if anyone had a sleeping off nights thing on their door. Very, very careful. Do not disturb anybody who's sleeping off night shift.
What's it like? Obviously, we're talking sort of about growing up there. Where there's lots of stuff going on. You talk about the Berlin Wall
Mhm.
falling. Are you aware of that stuff as a sort of semi young child?
Yeah, I mean, again, probably just being an overly geek. So one of my earliest memories was my dad was waking me up at 2 o'clock in the morning, the day the Berlin Wall came down, or the night the Berlin Wall came down, and just sat me in front of the telly and said, "You need to watch this. It's history." So that was when I was 8, about to turn 9. So that was November 1989, and that's something I've always remembered. And the next day, so we got the day off school, just nobody went because we all wandered down to, including teachers, we all wandered down to the Brandenburg Gate, and there's a picture of me somewhere which has yet to see the light of public day, of me in a very fetching grey and yellow coat from East Berlin, like a kind of puffer jacket type coat, standing on top of the Berlin Wall, and standing inside the Berlin Wall at one point as well. My sister and I standing inside the Berlin Wall. So those kind of things are formative, and you see how politics works. Even things like, on the trips we made through to East Berlin, you become very conscious of the watchtowers and the differences between two systems. Yeah, I've got loads of brilliant memories, just from living there, but also from those aspects as well of that kind of the difference between the East and the West. And I do a lot of stuff on defence and foreign affairs now as an MP, and it's so much of it I think has been formed by that without me realising it at the time.
What was schooling like on an RAF base?
So Berlin was so it was the English school structure. So I was born in Edinburgh. I'd lived there till I was six. Moved in '87, and so it was the English school system in Berlin. But Berlin had a slightly odd thing that I won't bore you with, something called the Berlin budget, which essentially was everything was paid for by the people of Berlin because we were formerly the invitation of the Berlin government. So there was essentially no budget. The teachers could spend whatever they wanted, and they did. So we had, Acorn computers, which were then incredibly new, one per classroom, which was unheard of, frankly. So the schooling was incredible. I had some very good teachers. One in fact who was from Falkirk that I still keep in touch with and see every couple of years.
I was going to say, were you able to like make friends that have lasted with you along the way?
Not really, to be honest. I think it's just that teacher that I knew that my mum and dad were friends with as well. I mean, the nature of any any forces kid will tell you this is that everything changes. So we were there on a fixed 3.5 years. We were there, but there's always a new battalion coming through. The RAF people were there for longer, but the army people that used the base was like there was the Welsh Fusiliers, the Scots Guards were through I think at one point. Different regiments. So you kind of change friends around quite a lot, and nothing. And it becomes just part of it. There's a few that are there for a couple of years, but everything changes. You don't have a stable class at any point. So yeah, it was genuinely brilliant, and actually something I always think back on as someone who's a bit older now and got my own kids is how brave a decision that was of my parents to just kind of uproot us from Edinburgh and off we went. When the Cold War was okay, it was quieting down by then in '87, but it had only been a few years since it was at its absolute peak, or one of its peaks in the kind of early '80s. That was only 3 or 4 years after, and we were in Berlin with Russian tanks and artillery a mile away. The bravery of that decision by my parents, I think, and, we, how formative it was for me and my sister, and which seems obvious it was always going to be. But then you go, well, that could have gone horribly wrong. That could have gone horribly wrong. Thinking back about how it must have felt for my parents to go, let's uproot the family and off we go. But it, no, absolutely fantastic experience. One I talk about a lot, and I'm bore my own kids with already, and will carry on for hopefully the rest of my life to bore them with.
But what was it like actually moving away from that and moving back? What was that experience like?
So we moved back. So when we left Berlin, we moved back to Warrington, 'cause just where my dad was able to get a job working still with the government, with Ministry of Defence, Foreign Office and Home Office stuff. So we lived in Warrington then for 2 years. Again, it's not something I really thought about at the time. You just kind of get used to moving around. So it was just again, you came back to it. I came into second to last year of what I would now call primary school, and then first year at high school in Warrington, and it just felt like going somewhere different and new. So when I lived in Warrington, oddly, one of Sarah Hall, who's the MP for one of the MPs for Warrington, her mother-in-law was one of my teachers,
Oh,
which is she was my English and drama teacher, which how small a world it is. So, but when I was in, again, I was there for Warrington for about 2.5 years till my family moved back up to Edinburgh.
what was it like moving around to all these different places? Did you have a place that you sort of felt was your own?
Yeah, Edinburgh was always home. Um, when I was growing up. So my dad during the week when we lived in Warrington, my dad worked away during the week in different places. I came back at weekends, and so kind of memories from that time are my dad would come home on a Thursday afternoon or a Friday, and we'd jump straight in the car. We'd drive up to Edinburgh, stay with my grandparents, and go to the Hearts football games at the weekend. So I've got very odd. Again, this is very odd memories of being driving in a car on the M6 at some time on a Friday night, listening to the news headlines on Radio 4 or whatever, which I found hilarious. And I, just chatting to my dad and for hours driving up and down the motorway, going to a Hearts game and driving back on a Sunday, which again, looking back on for all the driving my dad did during the week, to then do it again at the weekend with me was a bit mad. But it was just you just kind of get again you just kind of get used to it of having friends. And then oddly, when I moved back to Edinburgh, the friends that I met in what was then first year high school on my first day, my friend from my first day at high school is still my absolute best friend and was best man at my wedding. I've now known Alan for 30 something years.
What were you actually like as a child?
Oh God, I've no idea. Um, Probably quite. I was quite cheeky. I was the one who never. I didn't get into trouble, but I was the cheeky kid. I think I had always had a bit of back chat, but I was always kind of. I was always taught to speak up for myself and have an opinion. And as long as you were polite, it's okay to tell a teacher you think they're wrong, which I did on a few occasions. I had a history teacher in Warrington who I used to who used to have this habit of saying she was a lovely teacher, but she used to say, "Oh, the English army in World War II," which I used to bristle at and point out it was a UK army and a British army in World War II. So as long as it was done politely, but I was fairly cheeky, I think, but not I didn't get into too much trouble. I played football a lot, played chess quite a bit was my other thing that I kind of lost out of habit. But yeah, I don't know. I don't know what anyone else. I was thinking it'd be funny what someone else would describe me as. I don't know.
Having had sort of all them experiences, you talked about how they were quite, I guess, potentially formative. I wondered if politics was something that was ingrained in you from a young age and maybe led to where you are now.
I think politics was, but oddly not being a politician. So something that happened. So when I was in 1982, when I was 11, I got the day off school. I got the Friday off school because I stayed up all night to watch the 1992 general election results. Fairly peak political geekery, I think, at that point. And then when I was in Scotland, we had a class called Modern Studies, which, if you speak to Scottish MPs, all of their favourite classes, it was always Modern Studies. And Michael Shanks, for example, was a Modern Studies teacher. But I think it was first or second year high school when you were asked to pick a project. I picked a parliamentary whip system, which is not normal. Let's be honest. That is not a normal thing for a 11 or 12-year-old to pick. So I was always interested in politics, but oddly, at one point I wanted to be a journalist. I wanted to be a pilot. Uh, Oddly, being an actual politician never quite occurred to me at the time. As with a lot of things, I landed here by accident, but was always so I worked. Most all my career has been around politics, but working in public affairs and lobbying. So more that side of it and seeing how I like to see how things work. I guess I like seeing behind the scenes and I like seeing how things work and how decisions are made. But it never occurred to me that I'd be sitting where I am now.
Did your pilot career ever take off, or
Oh, and good in with the pun as well. That was good. No, sadly, I was told, although I'm now told this is nonsense. I had it in my head that I had to be good at physics to be a pilot, which I was. I was never good at science or maths, which I've now been told since was nonsense. And I didn't. So who knows? Maybe if I'd realised, I could have been flying around the world rather than sitting in Westminster bubbles.
I believe you were one of talking of education, you were one of the first people in your family to go to university. I wonder how much you value education and what did you actually study and how did you find it?
I studied politics, so I yeah. So I was my sister, who's 4 years older than me, will delight in saying she was the first to go to university. She's a clinical psychologist, so much more sciencey than me. So yeah, I mean, it's so my dad grew up in central Edinburgh, one of five kids in a kind of two room house essentially in central Edinburgh, which is now very posh or now very well sought after, I should say, during the festival especially. Um, and it was always something that it was never pushed on me to do, but it was. I think my parents, both my mum and dad, always you should have that opportunity. You shouldn't think of that as being beyond you. And I think that was their kind of feeling was that if it's something you want to do, you should be able to do it. So education's always something that's valuable, hugely valuable. And but for me, it speaks a lot more about opportunity and aspiration. That no one should feel they have to go to university to be successful at all. I think we're seeing more and more now actually that fewer people going to university or different people going to university would be better, given we're so lacking in technical skills that I could rant on about for a long time. I can barely hold a screwdriver, but I think it, so people like the areas I represent, so part of it in West Fife villages, which is a lot of old mining communities, and it's not that people there should be, told that if you want to be successful, you have to go to university or you have to leave here. But they should feel it's their option. That if they want to go to university, they should be able to. If they want to develop really good technical skills, they should be able to. If they want to work in the public sector or public services, they absolutely should be encouraged and able to. But it should be a choice. They shouldn't feel sunk by anything. I think that for me is the value of education, and kind of, it's not about education itself, but about lifting horizons and realizing what's out there. So one of the things that I- no matter how long I'm in this job for, I will remember the most is we had a primary school in Oakley called Inzavar, which is one of the old mining communities. It's full of quite a lot of areas of deprivation. And I first Christmas, I was like, we need a Christmas card. You know what? I'll go and ask them because they never get asked. So we'll go and ask them. And I was meant to go and present a Christmas card and say thank you for a 10-minute photo op. I was there about an hour and a half, and they were just amazing. And these are, a lot of young people who'd never seen outside of Edinburgh. And I was like, and so they feel very remote from Westminster. And there's no way they could ever afford to come down. So I worked with Babcock, who's the local employer, local dockyard in Rosyth. They were generous enough to pay for those kids to come down and see Westminster and go around and spend 2 days here with the teachers, just lifting their eyes to see there's a world outside that they could see. And one of the favorite things I do when I'm in Oakley, which I am a lot, those kids I will bump into them and they'll come and chat to me. And they go, how you doing? You're the guy who who had that trip to London. And I'll see them in high schools now because they're now about to enter second year. That kind of idea of getting kids to just lift their horizon, see there's a world out there, and let that lead them to make choices and have the opportunity. I think that's what we miss sometimes. So that was a long and rambling way to say education's important, but it's got to be seen as part of something more, not just an end in itself.
Um, on a note, sort of getting more into the politics side, was there anything that inspired you to want to actually get into politics on the sort of front line?
So this is where my wife and I have different remembrances of this event, of how I ended up as an elected politician rather than just chatting and talking nonsense to as a lobbyist. So there was, without going into the details of the personalities, there was in 2021. Um, I was living in Fife. We'd moved across a couple of years before, and I was displeased with certain local campaigns and local candidates, and I was ranting and raving, and I was frustrated, and I was like, we can do better than this. I kept saying we can do better. I kept going around, and my wife turned at some point. This is my memory of it, so therefore it must be true. And she said, "Look, could you shut the hell up or do something about it?" And I think she really regrets giving me that second option, because not long after, by a coincidence, and it was a coincidence, I got a phone call from the Labour Party saying, "Look, we're really short of a paper candidate in Aberdeenshire East. We're short of a candidate. Would you mind doing it?" And I was like, you know what? Bucket list thing, name on a ballot paper. That'll be fun. I am an Aberdeenshire. It's about a 2.5 hour drive. So it was, you're not meant to campaign in these seats, but because I wasn't doing this seriously, I was going to just do it as a bucket list thing to do, name on a ballot paper. I spent £100 and got some of my own leaflets printed, took the kids up. We all went up and kind of pretended that it was an election, a real election. And I enjoyed it. It was fun. But that was it. Then I realized the lesson I should have realized before, which is once you're in this, it's very hard to get out. And then it was, oh, well, there's a council elections in 22. And I was like, you know what? I'd really like that. I could genuinely go and help people. I think I've got something to add. Let's go and do that. And I really enjoyed it. And then I think, I've said this whenever people ask me about that kind of question. I think 85 to 90% of people in all political parties, at all levels of government, are in it to help people. I think that's their primary motivation, to help people and make things better. I disagree with them wildly sometimes about how, but I think that's 85, 90% at least. That's why they're there. And I think that's my views. I'm there to help individuals and to try and see if there's other things I can help with along the way.
Is there anything from your sort of younger days, either growing up or in work, etc., that you think has influenced or stayed with you in terms of your political convictions?
Yeah, I think. I mean, I'm sometimes accused of being pragmatic, which I'm not quite sure why. Um, I think the other thing that, so along with the Berlin Wall, which clearly was important, when I lived in Warrington, someone I played football with, Tim Parry, was blown up by the IRA and murdered. And I think that again has a, and I was 12, nearly 13 when Tim died, and that's something that's stuck with me. I then it kind of led me to university. I did my dissertation on the politics of paramilitaries in Northern Ireland. I then actually did some work in Northern Ireland as well when I was doing communications, and met some interesting people and had to I had to shake hands at one point with Mitch McLaughlin, who was a leading figure in the IRA, and that that's difficult. You know, you kind of, that makes you go, well, what's politics doing? What is politics when it fails? Politics when it fails is watchtowers and machine guns in Berlin, or dead 12-year-olds. And Jonathan Ball, who was I think 4 at the time, this other person who was the wee boy who was murdered by the IRA. Those kind of things show what happens when politics goes wrong. And those are the two things that stick with me. And I think probably does lead me to a bit of pragmatism and go, well, it has to work. First and foremost, this has to work, because this is what happens when it doesn't. And I've seen that fairly close up, what happens when it doesn't. So I think that's probably part of the root of the pragmatism. But those two experiences, I guess, that kind of stick with me quite a long way when I'm not directly. Again, it's very difficult. This is in my mind when I'm thinking about, you know, welfare reform. It's not. Let's be really clear, it's not. But those it's hard to imagine how those two events don't shape something in some way.
Um, Talking of that sort of, I guess, journey into becoming an MP, when did you decide to actually stand in your current seat, and how did you find that journey?
So I can't remember the dates because it all blurred a little bit, as these things do. I say I was being a councillor, I was quite enjoying it. At the point that someone had called me from the party and said, "Look, would you be interested in standing for Westminster?" Few conversations with my wife and stuff, and I said, "Look, I'm probably not going to get elected. Genuinely a 20-25% chance. I'm fairly good at being dispassionate about these things and stepping away. 20-25% chance, but there is a chance." Process was good, enjoyable, like to good chatting to people, gave you a moment to think things through. And then in my head, it was shortly after I was selected. It might not have been. I've got probably got the order the wrong way around. Liz Truss's economic explosion happened. And then there was a lot of controversy around the SNP and camper vans, which was found in Dunfermline. And all of a sudden, 25% chance went to 50-50, which went to a lot higher than that as we carried on. And I think a lot of it at that point was really about, if this happens, what's that going to mean for my family? And, you know, my wife didn't sign up to this when we got married in 2010. How are we going to manage this? How is this going to work? So that was, a lot of it was there. That was the kind of first bit. And right through, and, you know, and still now, that's always I try to keep that at the front of my mind, that whenever this ends, that I want to make sure there's something to go back to. And I think that's, politics is really hard for that. And you see that from speaking to colleagues and people who've been former MPs or ministers. The pressure it puts on family life is incredible.
Do you remember that election night? What was that like?
Um, so yeah, I mean, it's surreal. It's just surreal. I'd been at so many counts as an agent and other things, just as a volunteer and stuff over the years. It was actually quite odd not being at the count to begin with and watching things on the telly, which I didn't like. And I was constantly phoning my agent going, "Can I come in yet? Can I come in yet? Can I come in yet?" And it kept, there was a slight problem with the ballot boxes, so we got delayed a bit. So I think I was the last Scottish Labour MP elected. So it was like 5:30 in the morning. Something like that. So you go up, you do the media bit you've got to do. Came back down. I was bouncing off the walls on caffeine and sugar. My wife thankfully drove back, to the house. But then I had to get in. It was with a Richard Baker, another MP, who was again because the time was been so thrown. Got back to my house, quick shower, cup of coffee, changed, and we had to leave about an hour later to get to Glasgow for the photo op. So it was it was just exhausting. And then on the Saturday, we'd had a pre-planned on purpose activity with the kids to go and do essentially what was like a mini version of a Tough Mudder with paint being thrown at you. So there's a picture of me looking exhausted on the Saturday afternoon in a white t-shirt covered in paint and powder and mud and stuff, which was helpful therapy, I think it's fair to say, of just a little reminder of back to reality.
Is that easier or difficult than having, I guess, debates across the chamber in Westminster?
It's in that case, it was more just getting paint thrown at me and stuff. So that to be fair wasn't. It was just therapeutically fun of being a mess and not taking yourself seriously. I enjoy being in the chamber. It's nice. It's entertaining. I like the interventions. It takes a bit nerve wracking at first. I had a PMQ I think fairly early on when I was reading off a script, and it looks the images look a lot better than I was feeling at the time when I was started. When I was like, I just need to read this. I need to read this, and that took a wee while to get used to. And I'm not. I don't think you ever get used to it. I think it's quite nice that you're always a bit nervous, or I still feel a bit nervous in the chamber because you should take it seriously. You know, it should be something that's significant that feels weighty. But I think it's always important to remember that the world that we live in when we're down here is not real. It's utterly fake. I mean, it's great. It's enjoyable. It's important. Generally, the job I've got is the best one in the world. The atmosphere it exists in isn't real. It's not the real world. And I think it's always good, both when you're back in the constituency or just outside doing normal-ish things in this non-normal life. Having two daughters, 11 and 7, takes care of that fairly nicely. And my friends and team members and family make sure that I'm never that I always remember that I'm a real person and are very good at dragging me back down to earth if that's ever a problem.
How do you find, you sort of mentioned family life a bit there. How do you find the balance between living your personal life and working as an MP in that sort of balance?
It's difficult. I mean, there's no perfect balance. I mean, there's a reason. Anytime you go to an event or a politician or something will say thank you to my partner or thank my wife, thank my husband. I always say they always mean it. It sounds because it's oft repeated, but I think people think it's a throwaway. It's really not. The pressures that this puts on family and is is insane because it's a weird life, So I'm away most of the week, most weeks. So you miss out on things. Technology helps. My eldest daughter and I have a deal where before I was elected, she said I must. She was anxious about it, understandably. So she must see or hear from me every single day. She must see a video of me or talk to me on every single day. And I've kept that. So we're 2 years in, every single day, no matter where I've been, she's always had a video of me, which got me into trouble once. I went to Ukraine in February 2025 and couldn't tell I was going because she knew there was a war on because she's got Ukrainian kids at her school. So I pre-recorded videos for my wife to show her with different backgrounds and things. And I got into so much trouble when I got back, not for being away, which is what I thought she'd be upset with, but because I lied to her. About a week after I got back, I was at my mum and dad's and she broke down. She was really upset about something. I was like, what's wrong? I said, I don't understand. She said, you lied to me. And my heart just about broke in pieces. It was horrible. So and the Scottish school holidays being different is problematic as well. They're often off when Parliament's sitting. You try and get into a routine with it and you try and remember, you know, what's going on. And things like, so if they're down visiting, try and show them some stuff about what it is I do and things like that helps. It is really hard, and it is the thing I try and keep on top of the best I can.
Is there anything that surprised you since you became elected as an MP?
Um, I think, I mean, there's the boring. I think in general, it's there's not been a thing that I wasn't expecting, but what surprised me is there's more of everything. So being outside it as I was for a long time, I wasn't shocked by anything. the scale of everything is probably more than I thought. So we'll get 400 emails a day into the office routine, and some of them are junk and newsletters and get thrown away, but it all has to be helped and managed with. And I think the difficult thing is that you just can't help everybody. You can't do everything. Um, I think I think the surprise is that, so we'll get a lot of complaints about things like the NHS, which is devolved. We'll get complaints about justice, which is devolved, and it's how to respond to that person who's asked a legitimate question without sounding like you just don't care, because you're like, I'm not the right person to help with this. And I think I think if it surprised me, it's that there's not been, public maybe isn't as aware as they should be or would be helpful to be for them about who deals with what in particular. And sometimes that comes down to being, to the local SNP MSP not doing something, not saying something. And so because I feel a bit, my head's above the parapet a little bit, but I believe that's the right thing to do. I don't think politicians should hide away or be quiet or silent. I think you've got to put your head up and get shot at a bit. That's fine. That's how it should work up to a point. I think people should get to know what I think. But I think that to me is the surprise, is the level to which people are unaware of different levels of responsibility, and sometimes see the MP as senior, which isn't correct at all. SPs in Scotland have, health, education, transport, quite a lot of say on tax. There's a whole range of stuff where decisions are correctly, and I'm a huge believer in devolution, are correctly taken closer to people. And I think there's sometimes I think so. I guess my surprise is that people think I should be able to boss around an MSP or a councillor, and I shouldn't be. That's no. We should work together where we have responsibility, and there's crossover and stuff. But I think that's been a surprise, I think, overall.
On that note, I guess one of the reasons that we started this podcast is to learn a little bit about the politicians themselves, but also to talk about collaboration and sort of working together. Where we see on TV, Prime Minister's Questions is a good example of a lot of yelling and point scoring. But I wonder if you could talk about maybe some either friends across the aisle or work that you've done with other MPs and what that looks like.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is where my background in working in public affairs for 15 odd years probably helped, in that I was used to speaking to people across political parties, because if you want to make progress on anything, you had to. That was the nature of it. You needed everybody, or you wanted everybody on side. You wanted a consensus. Um, and I think, I'm sure this has come up in other episodes of the podcast as well, that we will shout and scream at each other occasionally and heckle the SNP, for example, and then go for a cup of tea, or we'll do a media interview. And I don't want to get anyone into trouble by naming their names, but I was doing a media panel with someone from the Conservatives, Liberal Democrats, and the SNP, and myself. And we were chatting away about the football or whatever it was. No problem at all. One of them turned around and went, the interview went, right, we've got to go live in 30 seconds. And someone turned around and went, right, should we all pretend to hate each other for the next 10 minutes? And did the 10 minutes, and then you're chatting again. And it's just, again, it's part of that this isn't real. And it's, you can disagree with someone, you can vehemently disagree with someone, but not think they're a bad person. And I think I would say that's the most common down here, certainly in politics generally. You can disagree with them for the time that you're disagreeing with them about, when you're talking about something you disagree on. Doesn't mean you disagree on everything. And when I do the school visits that I do, which I always really enjoy, I can see teachers getting a bit nervous at the side, because I tend to start off by saying things like, disagreement is good, arguing is good. These are good things to do. Argue with your teachers, argue with each other. Don't be rude. Don't be aggressive. You will learn something from arguing. You just for a second, the teachers go, oh God. It's like, yeah, that's how it should work. And if you teach people to disagree with each other without making it personal, and I think it's when it becomes personal that there's generally no need for it to become personal, or certainly not to hold grudges. There's areas, I'm trying to think. I mean, there's areas on things like foreign affairs or defence where I've worked with Conservatives, I've worked with Liberal Democrats, I've even sometimes worked with the SNP, where we actually, we broadly agree. There's broad agreement, not necessarily and then inside that it's more about priorities. Well, we agree on this. Well, my priority is a tiny bit over here, and yours is a tiny bit over there. they're not in conflict. They're not in conflict. We're all moving in the same broad direction. There's nothing wrong with you helping me on something and me helping you on something to ask. And sometimes it's just, again, I don't want to get anyone into trouble, but there's someone from the SNP asked me about, it was something about energy in relation to Ukraine. And they said, look, just because you're in government, would you mind asking a minister about this? Because you're more likely to get to them easier. Of course, no problem. Absolutely no problem. And similarly, there was an issue, it was a really small thing related to a constituent. And I said, look, could you just, to someone else in the SNP, I said, look, could you just ask a minister, could you just message them this and just ask them to look at it? Because it's no party politics. Could you just do that? Yeah, sure, no problem. And again, it's back to my optimistic but fundamental core point that 85-90% of politicians are in this for the right reasons. They're in it to help people. And if you give them an opportunity to help people, they'll probably take it. And again, when I was doing public affairs, it was always have the ask at the end. What do you want the politician to do? They want to do something. Give us a list of written questions. Give us an oral question. Give us a letter to write. Give us something to do that will help you and will help people. We'll probably do it because that's what we're fundamentally here for. We want to help.
I guess we've spoken a bit about working together and a bit of point scoring, and you've also mentioned football a few times throughout this interview. I wondered if you'd followed the World Cup and how you found Scotland.
It was, I mean, I'm a massive football fan. I'm a Hearts fan. I've got a season ticket. I still go with my dad. Scotland frustrate me in football and quite a lot of sports is that we've got this horrible habit of glorious failure. It was great to be back in the World Cup. It's been far too long. I was 17 at France 98. Always thought I might get to go to a World Cup at some point. I wasn't going out to America. That was going to cost way too much. And family balance caused that. That was going to be chaos if I suggested to my wife that I pop off to America for football for a week. But it could have been better, couldn't it? It could have just been a little bit better. And I think the frustration was, I don't know, it felt a bit like we didn't quite make the most of it. Like, going out wasn't a problem. I don't mind losing, but it just felt like we didn't make the most of it. But that said, we were there. We've maybe just got to get used to being back at these tournaments again. We've got to stop seeing being back at these tournaments as success, though. That's not success. That should become a benchmark. That should become normal. And then we've got to start doing better in them as well.
Do you support England now, or is that something that is difficult? I don't know.
No, I always like this question because no, I don't. No, I don't support England. I have nothing against England. I have nothing against them at all. But no, I support Scotland, and I don't do that. Anyone but England. That's all. No, I mean, I take the same attitude to England as I do to like Hibs in Scotland. If they do well, great. I don't care. If they lose, I'll laugh really loudly. But it's not an active again because it's you're not meant to want your rivals to win. England certainly. I hope England fans I know don't want Scotland to win. I don't want England to win. There's nothing wrong with rival. There's nothing wrong with kind of having a laugh and frankly taking the piss out of each other. It's fine as long as it only lasts for the 90 minutes, and that's the thing. So Hearts Hibs rivalry in Edinburgh is very much like that, rather than some of the Rangers Celtic stuff in Glasgow that spills over outside of football. So Hearts Hibs, you hate each other for 90 minutes. You scream and shout. You go mad. The game's over, and that's it. And then you'll go back in the same pub for a drink after the game. And if you've blown it in the last minute, you'll get sympathy because they're like, "Oh no, we'd have done that too. We're the other team that would have blown it." So no, football rivalries are great. They're a great way to let off steam. Just let it stop at 90 minutes. So no, I don't support England.
Is
But
is that the pragmatism coming out?
yes, there you go. Thanks for bringing it back to us. Yeah, we'll go with the pragmatism. It's fun. Rivalries are fun. It would be. I mean, I always think if everyone supported Scotland supported England, it'd be like, where's the fun in that? Where's the enjoyment in that?
Given we're on football, just briefly, I must ask your opinion on Hearts. Obviously, it was talking of glorious failure. It was right on the very last day, losing at
Oh,
the Inter Celtic there.
it's still too sore. It's too soon. It's too soon. I think Hearts will be back next year. I think usually these things happen in little kind of once every well. So my first season as a Hearts fan talking about glorious failure was 1985-86, where we lost it in the last 7 minutes at Dens Park in Dundee, and I was there. So I suppose we should talk about that as politically formative of painful, painful defeats. That's how to lead to the Labour Party. Painful defeats, painful general election defeats. Same thing. Um, No, I think so. We've lost a couple of players and a manager, but actually, I think some of the signings look really good. The new manager looks really good kind of background and pedigree. Tony Bloom's data analytics seem to have found some gems. Let's see how it goes. But we've got our first Champions League qualifier is next week against Jim Gratz, which I'm sadly missing the home leg of because I'm away on holiday. But I'll be watching that abroad. But I think maybe not immediately. I think there might not be another title challenge next year, but I think we'll be there or thereabouts in the future as well. I don't think that last year was a flash in the pan, and it was great to see people actually enjoying Scottish football again. The chaos that is utter insanity that is Scottish football, and some terrible Scottish referees.
Um, we talked about a bit of a rabbit hole on football there, my side. Talking a bit about you, like you living in your constituency up in Scotland. I wonder if you could talk to me about what that's like and what that area is like as well.
So it's yeah. So we moved across to Fife 7 years ago. Just right, 7 years ago, just over 7 years ago. Um, and it was just because my eldest daughter was about to start school, and um, where we were living before the primary school, there'd be a lot of new houses, and it needed to anyway. Boring story. And no, it's a fantastic part of the world. At that time, my job meant a lot of driving and traveling. It's really easy to get to Edinburgh and Glasgow. Dunfermline's got incredible history. It's both Scotland's ancient capital, so it's where Robert the Bruce is buried, and Scotland's ancient kings and queens. It's also Scotland's newest city. So which was one of the king's first engagements after he became king after the death of the queen, was to come and convey Dunfermline city status. So you've got, I think a lot of MPs maybe say this, but it's got a little bit of everything. So it's got that kind of history, tourism in the centre, huge potential for the future. It's got a lot of new build housing as well, a lot of young families in the area. It's got large employers like Babcock, which are building Type 31 frigates for the Royal Navy. We've got a large Amazon distribution centre employing thousands of people. We've got Maui we do fish food processing. So we've got large employers, a lot of transport. We've got a port that's in the Green Free Port. So huge potential for that side of industry. You've then got the West Fife villages, which is where I was a councillor as well, and where I live. I live in there, and it's got both kind of picturesque villages like Couris, which is where Outlander was filmed. Then you've got a lot of former mining villages like High Valleyfield, Oakley, Kincardine. We've got the site of the old Long Annet power station, coal power station. At one point was one of the largest carbon emitters in Europe, which is just across from Grangemouth. So you've got all these different bits. You've got kind of old, new, existing good things, plus a ton of potential. And you're seeing already how we're trying to harness some of that. So you've got all these kind of components that really make it a fantastic part of the world, just north of Edinburgh, 40 minutes to Glasgow, half an hour to Edinburgh. The fifth largest employer of people in my constituency is Edinburgh Airport campus. So you've got all these kind of bits that go together. So you've got a bit of everything. You've got areas of deprivation and opportunity where we need to do so much better. You've got existing employment opportunities, though, that are a way to pull people across. So it's got a little bit of everything. It's a fantastic place to live. And then further out in the constituency, you've got Dollar, which is in Clickmannanshire, which has got a private school, but also a lot of rural farming areas as well, out that way too. So you've got, it genuinely, I think, has a little bit of everything, which is interesting. Whenever announcements are made, I can go, I'm pretty sure someone in my constituency is going to have something to say about that. So, and they're not shy about doing so, as they shouldn't be.
Well, that's because obviously you're in your constituency for the weekend. What are you up to? What are you going to be doing if you have like a weekend up in Fife?
So usually, and it's trying to balance the work with the not work bit. So quite a lot of the time I'm taxi service, which is, parental role of taxiing to dance classes, drama classes. My wife runs one of the local brownies, and my daughter goes to guide. And my eldest daughter, has just started doing junior park run as well, which I'm slightly terrified she's going to try and get me into. I might can just about do the 3K. I'm not sure I could do the longer one, or certainly not quickly without looking like a mess. It's a lot of it is around spending time with the family when I've got time. To be honest, that's what I mainly try and do. We try and get the bikes out a little bit and go along the Fife coastal path, which is just absolutely beautiful to see out there. But a lot of it, to be honest, is family focused. Trying not to just do work, although being attached to this thing all weekend is always a bit of a problem. So it's mainly trying to do family stuff. There's great stuff to do in Dunfermline. There's the Alhambra Theatre. There's always something brilliant on there. Dunfermline High Street has got some really good independent cafes and shops now that slowly transforming itself out of that as well. We've got the Glen in Dunfermline, like a huge park in the centre, Pittingsheath Park in the centre, where there's peacocks and stuff as well. Always good. Peacocks have the freedom of the city of Dunfermline. They're allowed to walk wherever they like, and they do. You will be driving down the street in central Dunfermline and come across a peacock, and you try not to hit the peacock. So it's mainly just, there's just so much to do to get out and about in and around Dunfermline as well. Thankfully, my daughters are now both old enough. I don't have to suffer soft plays at the weekend anymore.
We're coming to the end of our time together, and I always like to ask if there was a bit of advice you could give your younger self. What would that be?
I'm not sure actually. I try not to have, one thing I've managed to just about survive is not having regrets. And there's a few things that I go, well, would I have changed that? I go, well, probably not, because I'm really happy with where I am and what I'm doing, what I've got. So if I pull a little thread on that, I'm not sure. I'm not sure I'd give advice to my younger self. I think they're probably going to be okay.
Amazing. I've started at the end of the podcast to do a winner stays on political leaders edition.
Oh, there is a Fife MP. This is guaranteed to get me into trouble, I can sense.
Well, I think it might be tricky based on where we are with the sort of current leadership, specifically of the Labour Party. Like, I guess technically the first question might now be Andy Burnham or Keir Starmer. So I don't know how you feel about that.
I think it's going to be Andy Burnham. I think that is, and he's going to do a great job. For
So
sure.
I would go down the Andy Burnham thread and do either or.
Let's go the either or. Let's do that.
Of the two prime ministers. So we'll take Andy Burnham, assuming that he becomes the next prime minister based on how it looks at the moment. So Andy Burnham versus Rishi Sunak.
Andy Burnham.
Andy Burnham versus Liz Truss.
Anyone but Liz Truss. So Andy Burnham.
Andy Burnham versus Boris Johnson.
Oh God, I take it doesn't stay this easy. Andy Burnham.
Andy Burnham versus Theresa May.
Andy Burnham.
Andy Burnham versus David Cameron.
Andy Burnham.
Andy Burnham versus Gordon Brown.
See, this is the Fife problem I've got now. I'm sure Andy wouldn't mind, because I know Andy and Gordon get on. So I'm going to say Gordon Brown, because he's got a record. Andy can get there. So Gordon Brown.
And we'll do a final one, which is obviously Gordon Brown versus Tony Blair.
They were both. Oh, that's Gordon Brown.
Gordon Brown picks up the win. So the winner for us on the Personality Politics podcast. Graeme Downing, thank you very much for joining me, and thank you very much for your time this morning.
Yes, thank you, Tom.
Thanks for listening to the Personality Politics podcast. If you enjoyed this conversation with Graeme Downie, make sure you subscribe to never miss an episode. You can follow the podcast on social media for exclusive clips. I've been Tom Lane. Thanks for listening. I'll see you next time on the Personality Politics podcast.